start the year and learn some Torah. Okay, we are on 42b, Mem base, Amid base. And we saw yesterday that in the Mishnah there was a machlokas between Rabbi Gamliel and the Chachamim, or Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shua. If you're in a boat, does that count as you're completely in your own 4 amos, and therefore you can travel the entire boat, even if the boat has moved you beyond the 2,000 amma, outside of the tomb? Nevertheless, you're allowed to walk around on the boat. And they told the story of Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, who would walk around the boat, and Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shua, who sat in their 4 amos when the boat took them outside of their space. And the Gemara had 2 opinions. Rabbah says because the walls of the boat count as an enclosure, and therefore it's all 1 dalet amma space. It's all considered, even if the boat's 100 by 100, you wouldn't have a square boat, but even if it was, it counts as a 4 by 4 because it's an enclosure in one space, and it's the space you are for Shabbos. Whereas Rabbi Zera said the reason is because it continuously takes you into a new 4 amos, because as the boat moves, it's taking you into a new 4 amos. So we're in the 3rd to last line of Mem Beis Amid Beis. My Beinayu. What distinction is there between these 2 opinions? What happens if the deck walls broke, and now there aren't actually walls, or there's less walls? Inami, because it's Masfina Sfina. Or if you hop from one boat to another, you jump off the main boat to a dinghy or whatever it is. So you're not in the same wall confines, but nevertheless, it keeps on taking you from one space to another. Rabbi Zera, my time. So why don't Rabbi Zera follow the opinion of Rabbi? After all, Rabbi's correct that he said correctly that you're inside a 4 wall enclosure. Why didn't he accept that that's indeed a good enough reason to say that that it all counts as 4 amos as your own space? So Rabbi Zera is going to say that it's not correct. It's true you're in a 4-wall space, but the walls of the boat are not to enclose the people in the boat, but rather to keep the water out so the boat doesn't sink. It's there to keep the water out, and so that doesn't count as an enclosure for you where you are, and it won't make the entire boat count as its own 4 amos. Rather, it's the actual physical measurements that would count, and so you have to stay within your 4 amos. And then now on 43a, the top one. Rabbi, my time Rabbi Zera. Why did Rabbi like Rabbi Zera's reasoning that as the boat moves, it's constantly giving you a new 4 amos, or as we saw yesterday at the end, Rashi said the reason is that as you take a step, you pick up your foot, you're in 1 4 amos, and as you put your foot down, you've already moved into a new 4 amos space. So Rabbi says actually, he doesn't accept that anybody disagrees when the boat's moving, that it counts as 4 amos, so you can go from place to place, and you can walk around the boat. Keep ligi b'shavna. It's talking about when the boat has thrown down an anchor and it's sitting in one place. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says our Mishnah seems to indicate that they're not disagreeing. Rabbi Akiva would also agree you can walk around the boat when it's moving, and it's only when it's sitting in one place that they disagree. And how do we know that? When they came from this place, seemingly somewhere in Italy, and they were coming back from this port in Italy, and the boat was through. John Barry wants to know. Let me start. And so the Mishnah told a story that they had traveled through, they left this place, Palandrosin, and they were on the boat, and Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah walked around the whole boat. Rabbi Shua, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shua, and Rabbi Akiva, they didn't want to move around. It says, because they wanted to be strict upon themselves, meaning halachically they were allowed to move around. So what distinction is there? Why would they be strict upon themselves, but halachically allowed to move around? Now, so if you say, as we just said, that they're not disagreeing if the boat's actually moving. Since the boat's moving, you're allowed to move around. And because it constantly creates a new 4 amma space for them. That's why it says they wanted to be strict upon themselves when it's moving, to remind them, so that they be sure that even when the boat is not moving, they'd also not, when they hold you, not allowed to walk around. So therefore, they were strict even when it was moving, on account of that when it's not moving, it's prohibited to walk around. Dilma Amda, because maybe the boat will throw down an anchor and you're not allowed to move around. Sorry?
How does this all stem with what we've seen before, I think a few times already, with the gangplank, whether the goy made it for himself or whether he made it for you personally? But if he made it for himself, you could go down the gangplank on Shabbos. How can you get to the gangplank if you're not allowed to move?
I'm not sure.
This is saying that once the ship sets anchor and stationary, then they were machmir that they couldn't move. But we've already seen a few times where there was a question about leaving the boat on Shabbos, going down the gangplank that they made.
That's also, sorry. Yeah, that's the last line in this Mishnah. Right, that is the last line in this Mishnah itself, where the story was they asked Rabbi Gamliel whether they can come off the boat. And he says, yes, you're allowed to get off the boat. And the reason for that you were allowed to get off the boat was because they were already within the Techum. He used, as we'll see soon, this what they call today Jacob's staff. He used some stick to measure that they were already within 2,000 amma of the dock when Shabbos said it. That's the reason that they were allowed to get off, and that's the last line in the Mishnah. Right? They came there after dark. Are we allowed to get off? And he said, you're allowed to get off. Because I was looking, and we were already in the Tchum before it got dark. So that's the last line of the Mishnah. That's why they were allowed to get off. But indeed, otherwise, if they had come from outside the Tchum, they would not be able to get off the ship. In any case, so the Gemara says that this is good evidence in the Mishnah that it indicates from the fact that it says in the Brisa that they wanted to be strict upon themselves to not walk around, meaning because when the boat's moving, everybody agrees that it actually, there's no question of Tchum because you're constantly in a new 4 amma space, but it's within your 4 amma. So every step you take, you're in 4 ammas. You haven't left your previous space, but the boat's moving you into an entirely new space. The real question is when the boat's standing. That's where the machlokas is. Whether Rabbi Gamliel says you're allowed to move around, and Rabbi Yeshua will say you're not allowed to move around. You have to remain in your 4 amma space, and that's why Rabbi said that the reason was, the question was whether or not the boat counts as an enclosure, and not whether you're moving from one space to another. Another deka. Eliyamas, sorry, the Gemara says, but if you're going to tell Eliyamas pligi, that if you're going to say that the machlokas is even when they're moving around, why would it say that they want to be strict upon themselves to remain in their 4 ammas? It's not because they wanted to be strict, but rather because they held that it was prohibited to move around the boat. So So therefore, we see that the text of Ratzu Lahachmin, that they want to be strict, indicates that there's no machlokas when the boat's moving. Amar Ravashi. Furthermore, Ravashi said that the Mishnah is also indicative of this, because it says the Tani Svina Dumi the Dir Vasar, because it juxtaposes and puts together this concept of a boat together with the Dir Vasar, a prison and a fenced-in pen. Now, these are stationary spaces, obviously, and a fenced-in stationary space, and the Mishnah puts together with it a spina, a boat. So we see that it's talking about a stationary space. Ma dir vasar, that could be just as the fenced-in pen and prison are stationary. Afspina nami, that could be, so too the boat is stationary, and that's where there's a machlokas of whether or not it counts as an enclosed space that's all for Amasan. The halacha is like Rabbi Gamliel by a boat. Now, hilchasa michlal the pligi. From the fact you say that it's the halacha, that we see that there is machlokas in. Yes, indeed. But we learned that Hananiah said, Kol osayim yashvu v'danim b'devar halacha. That entire day that they were on the boat, they were dealing with the halacha, they were arguing about this. And Emesh, and towards the evening, Echriya, Achiaba, my uncle, Rabbi Yeshua, concluded, Halacha Rabbi Gamliel b'svina, Halacha Rabbi Kiva d'Irasah, that they, in the end, Rabbi Yeshua agreed to Rabbi Gamliel in regards to the boat, and said the halacha is indeed that you're allowed to walk around in the boat. However, in Dir V'Sohar, in a pen, which is stationary, in a Sohar, a prison, that they moved you in there, outside of the Techum, you wouldn't be allowed to move around beyond the 4 amas. Even though that's an enclosed space. By Rav Hanania asked, this concept, we know that a public domain is only up to 10 tefachim. And there are ways where if you're carrying something above the 10 tefachim, when you put something down above the 10 tefachim in the public domain, it would not count as transgressing carrying on Shabbos. And this has ramifications. Obviously, if you're walking in the public domain and you're carrying something on the shoulder, the Gemara said that does not count as, that counts as you're carrying in the public domain, even though that the object itself is above. But it could be where you're not walking in the public domain, you throw something above, or you put something above. We saw in Shabbos and in the beginning of Masechta various ramifications for that. The public domain actually only goes up to 10 tefachim. What about in regards to Chum Shabbos? That the distance you're not allowed goes beyond 2,000 amma. What about if you're actually traveling above the 10 tefachim? So what's that scenario? If you're actually walking on planks that are 10 tefachim high and 4 tefachim wide, so that's its own halachic domain. So that wouldn't be above 10 tefachim. That's just the hillside. That is the new travel boundary. If you have, just because you have a hill doesn't make it above 10 tefachim of the ground. It doesn't go by sea level, right? So you walked up a hill, that's not going to count as you're above 10 tefachim. So that's not a question. That's just that ground. So where's your question? What happens if you're taking steps on someone's fence? Okay, you're walking along a fence line. The fence itself is less than 4 tefachim wide. It's not 12 inches wide, and it goes miles. And so maybe you're allowed to walk that even beyond the 2,000 amma because it's outside of the domain, the public domain. Inami, or perhaps or somehow you're flying through the air. Rashi says you did so by some stating some shame, some Kabbalistic formula, and you're flying, or you whatever other thing, you got a jetpack on, and you're flying through the air, but it's above 10 tvachim. Are you allowed to do so? Lishnachri bisfina, or a more practical thing would be you're in a boat. The water relative to the ground, to the seabed, is above 10 tvachim, and so you're floating above 10 tvachim of the ground. Does that count as you're traveling 2,000 amma, or that's not within the space, and that's fine? My Amar Rav Yeshua. So Yeshua says, well, let's see from the case of our Mishnah. Masa Shabom Plandrasin, Vefligas Vinasa Bayam. The story was that they were coming from Rome, and their boat was in the water over Shabbos, and Rabbi Gamliel and Rabbi Elazar Azariah walked around. Rabbi Yeshua would not walk around. Now, if you tell me that there is a concept of Tachum, that the distance that you're limited going to is applies to Shabbos, therefore they want to be strict upon themselves and not walk around, because they held that the concept of Tachum applies. And the question was whether a boat counts as 1 4 amma space because it has an enclosure or not. So we see that Techumin apply even above the ground. Well, Rava said actually that there would be distinction in whether the boat was in shallow water, and maybe was it within shallow water. So too, maybe Rabbi Gamliel or Rabbi Kiva, that ship was also in shallow water. So no proof. Tashana. So let's learn from here. The last line in the Mishnah, where the boat didn't come in until it was already dark. And he said, look, I was watching and we were within the Techum 2,000 amma. If you say there's Techumin above 10 Tfachim, Eliamas ain't Techumin. But if you say there's no Techumin, even if you are not within the Techum, who cares? Here's where Rava said, actually, as the boat was coming into the dock, it was within shallow water for the last 2,000 amma, which is obviously a much more likely scenario than the first one, where all the way they're traveling from, through the Mediterranean from Italy to Eretz Yisrael, and they were in shallow water. Either way, the concept is, the question remains: if the water is above 10 tefachim, will it count as outside of the concept of tchum, because it's above 10 tefachim and the boat's traveling, and you could travel for miles and miles and miles, and it would not be a prohibition of going beyond your tchum, because tchum only applies on the ground and not above 10 tefachim. Above 10 tefachim is not a domain at all, and you can travel as far as you want.
Are we talking about 10 tefachim above the water line, or the water line
above the seabed?
So it's unlikely that I think it's unlikely that a seaworthy vessel is not going to have displacement of the hull that's less than 30 inches for 2,000 ammas. That's kind of stretching the.
Well, the bottom of the ship would have to be above 10 tefachim, depending on where they were, right? They were in a domain of its own, which would not count as long as the bottom of the ship was within the 30 inches of the shallow waters. Now it depends what were they in the big ship, or were they already in their smaller dinghies coming into dock? I don't know exactly what was going on, but that's what Rava says. You have shallow waters from the bottom of the boat, from the bottom of the vessel, whichever vessel it was, to the water.
Measuring 10 tefachim from the seabed to the bottom of the ship?
Correct. Because once you have 10 tvachim, you're within that space. The fact that you're on on the second floor, on the deck, it's not going to change it like we saw before. As long as it's 10 tvachim high, 4 tvachim wide, it's just going to be another layer of that. In any case, the Gemara is going to try and prove it from an interesting scenario, what happened in the two academies in Surah and Pumbedisa. Toshima. Come and learn. Hani Shev Shmaitzer, there were 7 teachings, halachic teachings that were taught. This Amram B'Tzafra B'Shabsa, one Shabbos morning, they were taught Kamedu Rav Chisda B'Surah. Somebody came in and said, I have 7 teachings to teach in front of Rav Chisda. And they were taught in Surah, in the Academy of Surah. Bahadi Hanya B'Shabsa, that Shabbos afternoon, Kamei the Rabba B'Pumbedisa. It was taught, that same teaching was taught in front of Rabba in Pumbedisa. And the Gemara, and at the time they were like, who taught these? And how was it that in Surah and in Pumbedisa, which were more than 4,000 amma from each other, so nobody could have had an eruv enough that they would be able to travel from one city to the next and teach in both academies on the same day. Yet they came and taught these very same 7 halachos in both academies on the same Shabbos, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So manam rinu. So who was able to say this? Well, it wasn't one of the chachamim, because how they get from one place to the other must be Lav Eliyahu. Wouldn't you say it was Eliyahu Hanavi? And since Eliyahu can travel above 10 tvachim, he was allowed to travel from one end to the other. We don't have time to get into the question of why would Eliyahu be bound by the halachos of Shabbos? He's no longer alive, and so the question is said, well, Eliyahu Hanavi actually did not die in the typical fashion. He went up to heaven in the fiery chariots, and so what's the status of Eliyahu Hanavi? Is he still obligated in mitzvos or not? And this Gemara, at least in the question, indicates that he would be obligated in the boundaries of Shabbos, and therefore he would not be able to travel from one place to another without the halachic dispensation of the fact that he's traveling above 10 tefachim from one to the other. Very fascinating question. The way the poskim asked this question is: Eliyahu Hanavi's wife a widow, or she's still married? Well, she's not alive, but after he went up to heaven, was she still married, or was she a widow? That's to ask the same question: is he still obligated in mitzvos, or is he no longer obligated in mitzvos? And here the Gemara is assuming that he'd be obligated by the boundaries of Shabbos. Poskim ask, Eliyahu Hanavi comes to every bris. How does he travel to a bris? We'll leave it. Amrinu, it must be Eliyahu Hanavi is the one that said it, right? Alma ain t'chumin. So that would indicate to us that Eliyahu Hanavi traveled from one to another place to another, from Surah to Pumbedisa. Must be he's the one that taught it, because who else could go from the two academies? And if so, you see that you can travel above 10 tvachim. So Gemara says, look, Eliyahu Hanavi is not the only non-physical entity we have around. Dilma, Yosef Sheda. Maybe it's Yosef the Shed who is not obligated by Shabbos. He was not a Jewish person to begin with, so he's not obligated by Shabbos, and he could travel from one to the other. Yeah, all right. So that proof is not a good enough proof. Tashima, let's prove it from this. Somebody said, Hareini Nazar b'Yom Sheben David. Somebody says, on the day that Ben David comes, Mashiach comes, I accept upon myself Nazirus. Now, since he didn't say when then Mashiach comes, but on the day, so on any given day, that could be the day, and so he has to start off the day in keeping the Nazir oath, at the end of the day, retroactively we'll know he was not a Nazir that day. But at the beginning of the day, he may be a Nazir that day, and so he can't eat wine, grapes, drink wine, become tummy, etc. So mutter lishtas yayin b'Shabbos Yom Tovim. And as the Gemara is going to explain later, if the first day of the oath is on the first day of the oath is on a Shabbos, so he's allowed to break the oath that day. Why? Because as the Gemara is going to say, Mashiach does not come on Shabbos. We'll see in a moment why. And now we turn to Mem Gimel Amud Beis 43b. But any weekday is not allowed to drink wine on account of maybe Mashiach is going to come that day. And if Mashiach comes from the beginning of the day, he's obligated in Nazir oath. Now, if you tell me that there's a problem of Tachum above 10 Tvachim, this is why on Shabbos and Yontif, Mashiach can't come. Because even if he's going to travel on the wings of an eagle or whatever it is, he cannot come he can't come above 10 Tvachim. He can't travel that distance, and therefore you don't have to be worried Mashiach coming on Shabbos. Not worried. You don't have to. Your oath won't take effect of Mashiach coming on Shabbos because he's not coming on Shabbos anyhow. He can't travel above 10 Tvachim. But if he can travel above 10 Tvachim, so why on Shabbos don't you think Mashiach is going to come? So why are you not obligated by your Nazir oath on Shabbos and Yontif? There's another reason. It's not on account of that Mashiach can't actually come on that day, but rather the reason is that the day before Mashiach comes, Eliyahu Hanavi is going to come and announce that the next day Mashiach is going to come. And since Eliyahu Hanavi is not coming on Shabbos, and he didn't come, so therefore you don't have to be a Nazir on account of Mashiach coming that day. So you don't have to assume that maybe Mashiach is going to come that day. The Amar cries, it says in the verse, behold, I send to you Eliyahu Hanavi on the day before before that great day comes. And since Friday Eliyahu didn't come, so on Shabbos Mashiach is not coming, and so you don't have to keep the Nazir oath. Someone says, well, that doesn't apply only to Shabbos, that applies to every day. Every morning you can wake up and say, Eliyahu didn't come yesterday, so I'm not a Nazir today. So every single day should be permissible in wine and be allowed to do this, because after all, Mashiach is not coming. Because Eliyahu didn't come yesterday, so I know Mashiach's not coming today. Now the Gemara says, Eli Amrinan, what we say is Lebesin Agadolasa. It's not coming to us. Eliyahu's not going to come to us. He's going to go to the great Beis Din and the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim and tell the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim, hello, my name is Eliyahu Hanavi. I've come here to tell you that tomorrow Mashiach comes. And that you wouldn't know about necessarily. And since you wouldn't know about it necessarily, you have to keep your Nazir oath on account of maybe Eliyahu went to the Beis Din Yerushalayim yesterday. And today, being a weekday, Mashiach is going to arrive. But on Shabbos, you know that's not the case. Well, then on Shabbos also, maybe he came on a Friday. Eliyahu Hanavi went to the Beis Din in Yerushalayim and told him, by the way, Mashiach is coming tomorrow on Shabbos. So if it's based upon Eliyahu Hanavi coming the day before, well, he may have come the day before already to the Beis Din as well. Just as on a Tuesday, you wouldn't know that he arrived on Monday to the Beis Din and told them that tomorrow, Tuesday, Mashiach is coming. So too, Eliyahu Hanavi would not come, may have come on Friday to the Beis Din and told them tomorrow, Shabbos, Mashiach is coming. The Gemara says, no, we already know, Kvar Muftach Lehen Yisrael, Shein Eliyahu Ba. We already have a promise that Eliyahu is not coming. Lo Ba'arish Shabbos. not on Fridays before Shabbos, and not on Erev Yontif. Eliyahu is not going to come and tell the Beis Din that Mashiach's coming the next day, and the Beis Din would then spread the word because everybody's busy preparing for Shabbos, preparing for Yontif, and when Eliyahu comes to tell them, oh, by the way, tomorrow Mashiach's coming, people are going to stop preparing for Shabbos and Yontif. They're going to neglect the obligations of and the responsibilities of Shabbos and Yontif, and so that's going to be too tumultuous, and so Eliyahu is not arriving on Friday to notify, and so therefore Mashiach is not going to come on Shabbos or Yom Tov, and so this person doesn't have to take a note. So it has nothing to do with Mashiach traveling above 10 Tvachim, below 10 Tvachim, beyond the 2,000 Amma. It's simply Eliyahu is not coming on Friday, and that's why the Nazir oath won't apply on Shabbos. And the Gemara at first thinks that if Eliyahu doesn't come on Friday to notify Mashiach's coming, well then also Mashiach himself also wouldn't come on Friday. That means on a Thursday, Eliyahu wouldn't come to notify Mashiach's coming next day, because if Mashiach comes on Friday, also it's going to we're going to neglect the needs of Shabbos. So therefore, literally, he should be allowed to drink wine and eat grapes on a Friday as well, because Mashiach's not going to come that day, because it's going to be disruptive to Shabbos. Eliyahu says no. Eliyahu actually won't come. However, Mashiach would come on a Friday. The kiva nasa Mashiach, because as the Navi promised that once Mashiach comes, Hakol Avodim Ein Yisrael, that all the people who want to partake, the non-Jews who want to partake in Mashiach and are excited for the redemption, are also going to offer their service to Am Yisrael, and people are going to want to partake in this celebration and in the Mosa Mashiach and the days of Mashiach, and so they'll be making Shabbos with us and cooking and taking care of the needs as we go to greet Mashiach. So the Gemara says, okay, let's say, okay, so we now know Eliyahu won't come on a Friday, so Mashiach won't come on Shabbos. Eliyahu would come on Friday because Mashiach can come on Eliyahu would come on Thursday because Mashiach would come on Friday, because we're not worried about Shabbos and taking care of our neighbors. Will do that for us. Great. What about Sunday? Mashiach's not coming on Sunday because the day before Eliyahu has to come to notify, and Eliyahu can't travel on Shabbos to notify. Well, let him drink wine and this Nazir drink wine and eat grapes on Sunday, because he wouldn't have. The Mashiach's not coming on a Sunday because Eliyahu can't travel, and since we didn't say that, we said even on a Sunday he's prohibited in wine. Must be the Mashiach could come on Sunday, which means Eliyahu could come on Shabbos. That means Eliyahu can travel above 10 Tvachim, and there's no limit of Techum. Because if there's a limit of Techum, the first day of the week, meaning Sunday, he should be permitted in drinking wine, because Eliyahu had not come on Shabbos because he can't travel. So Gemara says, no proof. Perhaps the reason this person has to drink wine is because we don't know if Eliyahu Hanavi can travel on Shabbos or not. We don't know. Can Eliyahu Hanavi travel on Shabbos or not? Is there a limit of 10 of 2,000 amma above 10 tvachim or not? So since we don't know, on Sunday he can't drink because maybe Mashiach is going to come, because maybe Eliyahu Hanavi went already to the Beis Din to notify them that it's that Mashiach's coming. And therefore he's strict. Sunday he has to be a Nazir. Friday he has to be a Nazir. But on Shabbos he's exempt because he didn't come the day before. Now the Gemara says, the Koy Amos. When did this person accept this promise? The Kanadar. When did he make the promise? Ilema, the Koy Bechol. If it's on a weekday, once the Nazirus came upon him, why would Shabbos release that obligation that already took effect upon him. Because maybe Mashiach came already to the basin and he doesn't know about it. Ella the Koy b'Shabbos must be that it came on Shabbos. The Konodar, and he took an oath. Yontif, or he's in the midst of Yontif, Konodar, and he took an oath. And on that day it's permissible, but after that it would be prohibited. In other words, Rashi explains that the truth is that every day at the end of the day, he can assume, oh, Mashiach didn't come that day. But since maybe he just doesn't know, Mashiach arrived, Eliyahu Hanavi, yesterday and today, Mashiach, they already arrived to the base of Nagadol in Yerushalayim, and he simply doesn't know about it yet. And therefore, he has to maintain out of doubt this oath, if not for that the original day that he accepted it was Shabbos. Let's read on to the end of the day, and we have a few moments. We'll address a couple of interesting points about this. Obviously, very unique halachic discussion. Once they didn't enter the Namal, they didn't get into the port until Shabbos. Tanya, it was already evening. So Tanya Rabbi Gamliel had this tube of some sort. It was a staff. That he can measure the distance of 2,000 amma. And it's an old measuring tool that based on either the sun or one of the stars and a certain height of a piece of wood perpendicular to your staff. And you can see that if the distance to the sun and your staff is A, then the bottom distance also would be the same distance, called a Jacob staff, as I'm showing you here on this image. So that he could measure something 2,000 amma the abasha on land, connect the apayim yam, and equally to that, he was able to measure 2,000 amma in the sea. And now the Gemara uses the same device to say that a person can also measure depth of a hillside, depth of a valley in the same way. That if they know the distance that a certain staff, a certain measurement on the staff will show them, somebody wants to know how deep a certain valley or a hillside is, or a canyon, maybe Shreferes brings the same tool, and he looks at it in distance, and then he can look down in the same distance. And he'll know distance of 2,000 amma of this whatever distance it is, the distance of the depth as well. Now, once the Gemara is giving you advice on how to measure, how to use this device to measure depth of a valley, it tells us other measurements that we can make. Somebody wants to know the height of a tree or something else, wants to know the height of something, and you're going to have a tool to measure the height. So, so measure the ratio of your height versus your shadow. So it's midday or whatever time in the day it is. So you measure your shadow versus yourself. So let's say your height is 6 feet and your shadow is 12 feet. So you know that the shadow is currently double the height of yourself. So then measure the tree's shadow also, and you'll know that the tree is half the height of the measure of the height. So that's the advice of using your own ratio to your shadow ratio to use the same for the tree. There's animals in the graveyard that are hanging out near the tombstone, and you don't want them using the shade of the tombstone during the day. So at 4 hours into the day, which is when the animals start going into shade, where it starts becoming hot enough that the difference between the sun in the direct sun and the shade is significant. So you have to know what direction the shade is at that time. So noetz kana b'dala trezvia. So you put in a staff near the grave at 4 hours into the day, and you see which direction the shadow is. And then once you know that, then you put in some concrete, cement, whatever. You put in an angled, like a sloped pile, cement or whatever, on the side of the tombstone. That side, that the shadow is strongest there, and that's where the animal is going to be looking for a place to hang out. All right, so we'll leave the rest for tomorrow, which is a new discussion of somebody who as he was walking, as he was studying, walked out of the Tchum, and as a result was stuck wherever he was. And the question was how to help him get back in, and we'll see about a human fence, all of that for tomorrow. And there's an interesting halachic discussion that comes up in this question. The previous Gemara assumed that Eliyahu Navi is not going to announce to all of Am Yisrael that Mashiach is coming the next day, but Eliyahu Navi is going to come to the Beis Din, the great Beis Din, and pronounce it. Now, we don't have a Sanhedrin today. In order for the Sanhedrin to come, we would have to have a smicha, the proper, the real smicha, even though we talk about rabbis having smicha today, but actual smicha comes from a direct Moshe Rabbeinu line of smicha, and the Romans stopped that. We don't have a direct line of smicha. The Rambam is of the opinion that if the majority of Chachamim, Chachmei Yisrael, give someone smicha, they would that would count as a valid smicha. It was a great debate, and in fact, Rabbi Rav tried to do that and reinstitute the smicha system. Well, many ask, what's the source of the Rambam that there is such a reinstitution of smicha without Moshe Rabbeinu coming and actually giving smicha, or someone that was ordained directly that way in that line? And they say the evidence is from this Gemara, because the Gemara says there's going to be a Sanhedrin before Eliyahu comes, and Eliyahu is going to come to that Sanhedrin, which indicates that there was going to be a reconstitution of the smicha system. Okay, we're going to run off the show for slichos, and we'll continue tomorrow with the discussion of a human fence for someone to come back into the Eruv area.